Google Glass was something where we were exactly right.
Yeah.
And we were too early. You just believe in flying cars and you want to do flying cars. I sincerely wish you the best, and I'm begging you, do not come to X.
Is there a moonshot that you think should be happening right now but isn't?
15 and a half years ago when we started Waymo, nobody was saying that.
And you're just like, ugh, I feel bad for whoever's in the back of that thing.
What are the dumb rules in my life, and how comfortable can I get breaking them?
What do you think is an underrated invisible crisis?
Organizations that are working with that attitude in mind, you will probably find the winners.
When we arrived here, there's that line on the floor that says, "You may never cross this line," which I made Abby take a photo of me crossing the line. I think that's what that's there for, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
How did it feel?
I mean, a little rebellious, I suppose. There's also 2 lines, so it's like, well, which line am I not supposed to cross? And I crossed both.
Good.
Is that the idea?
Yeah, it was meant to be a very thin X, but yeah.
Oh, okay, yes. That makes sense. I was like, these lines aren't really demarcating anything too differently from one another. No, that's clever. Yeah, I crossed both lines and then took a cheeky picture. But what's the idea behind that? Just get everybody rebelling before they actually get to work?
Yeah, like here at Alphabet's Moonshot Factory, our job is to harvest nonconformity in a productive way. It's easy to be randomly nonconformist, just be an anarchist, just like go off in random directions.
Light things on fire.
But the reason we call it a moonshot factory is because we're trying to systematize radical innovation. So we're trying to take moonshots, but that's hence the word moonshot, but factory, we're trying to systematize the process. And so reminding people to get out of their comfort zones, to realize the extent to which there are rules in their heads. Like, if you work here at X, I don't want you hurting anybody. I don't want you embezzling. And good. There are a huge number of rules in your head that are not actually rules. They're just how it's done.
Okay.
And it's your job to question all of those. And so putting a dumb rule, like you may not cross this line, across the beginning, the entrance to our building, forces people every day to say, what are the dumb rules in my life and how comfortable can I get breaking them?
I like that. Well, it's like the you have to push the eject button on the USB drive before you pull it out. That's a dumb rule. I don't understand that one. I feel like you need to get rid of that one next. But congrats. By the way, I went into the restroom here. Usually don't start a show like this, but I went to the restroom here and I was like, watch this place be the only place where the infrared faucets actually work. And it's true.
Yes.
They work. And you go to the airport and you're like, Elon, what are you doing with your life when I can't get the water to work at LAX? But here at Google X, you figured out how to get those things to work. So, some engineer probably spent his day off fine-tuning those things, right?
I wouldn't actually put it out of the question.
Yeah. Yeah. What is, so for people who don't know, can you mentioned that X is kind of like, you're systematizing the moonshot thing. It sort of feels like Q branch of MI6, but for everyone, because we all get to play with the tech. And
Thanks. I love that framing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to be a kind of 21st century Bell Labs. So our job is not to solve Google's current problems. That is explicitly not our job. Our job is to go find new problems for Alphabet and in the world, huge problems that we can come up with a science fiction sounding product or service that, however unlikely it is we could actually make it, we can agree ahead of time if we could make that science fiction sounding product or service, it would largely or meaningfully resolve that huge problem with the world. And then we have to convince ourselves that there's some breakthrough technology, which even if it doesn't guarantee us that we can make that science fiction sounding product or service, it gives us a chance. If we have all three of those things, the huge problem, the radical proposed solution, and the breakthrough technology, we're not done. That's legitimate beginning of the journey. That is a moonshot story hypothesis. And then we can go test it.
Yeah, it seems like it's got to be tough to figure out if you're chasing a moonshot or a mirage. And I suppose it's a years-long process sometimes in figuring out whether or not you're going to hit a crazy dead end, because it seems you have to pick something that's like, okay, that's currently kind of impossible, but not because physics don't allow it to be possible, but it's just practical enough for us to chase it. We just need to figure out, I don't know, how to get laser internet to go through clouds sometimes in some way. But that's not like physically impossible. It's just hard, really hard, and no one knows how to do it yet. There's got to be like a really good sifting process for those kind of problems.
Exactly. So we start with another way of talking about it is a non-stupid suspension of disbelief. Again, very easy to just suspend disbelief and wanting to have the world be the way you want to have it if you're willing to deny reality. But to be able to suspend your disbelief for a non-stupid reason, to have a specific theory about the world, it's okay that you're probably wrong, but that makes it testable. And then if you work here, the next step is how fast, how cheaply can you verify that you're wrong, get some evidence that you're wrong, so that we can put your idea to rest and move on to the next idea. If you need to be right, you're going to hate this place.
Yeah. That's got to be tough.
You have to be excited about the idea of how great we are at filtering the ideas, not how great you are at having been right with your idea.
Yeah. The prototype thing that you mentioned earlier, and I heard you talk about this on the Moonshot podcast, which we'll link to in the show notes. The robot that's downstairs across the line you're never supposed to cross, the kind of looks like a little tiny car wash kind of thing. That's the genotype. That's the thing that goes to the farmer field and looks at the plants and genotypes the plants. But the prototype to that was like, what was it like? It was like a push cart with a couple of Google Pixel phones duct taped to the thing or whatever. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it was basically
exactly
that.
In the very early days of one of our explorations into computational agriculture, someone was talking about being able to get out in a field regularly and not only see a strawberry plant, for example, and know the characteristics of the strawberry plant while rolling by it at 10 miles an hour, but being able to look at that strawberry plant a week from now and know it was the same strawberry plant so you can track how it grows over time. If you were here at X and you were proposing that, the answer is cool, awesome idea. Let's talk about how would that be good for the world? Sure, we can maybe satisfy ourselves. That would help the farmers of the world grow crops more effectively. What is the absolute cheapest, fastest way you could get out into a strawberry field and find out if it's a little less crazy than we thought or a little bit more crazy than we thought? No, you can't go build something expensive for the next year. 4 bicycle wheels, some PVC tubing, a laptop and a GoPro camera, and some duct tape.
Right.
Get out there tomorrow, literally tomorrow, and start capturing some images. You're going to throw that away. That's never going to be a product. The goal is not to make a product. The goal is to get the first 1 or 2 pieces of evidence as fast as we can, as cheaply as we can. Is this one of these things that might be a once in a generation opportunity for us or not?
Yeah, I love these kinds of ideas. You've worked on some really cool projects, smart contact lenses that track glucose levels, which is anything that's in your eyes is always like very sci-fi to me and cool. Some people think it's creepy. I'm fine with it. Wearable tech that can enhance human senses. But what is, and this is going to be tough, but what's one project at X that felt like pure science fiction but was real enough to prototype? Because the agricultural thing, okay, fine, but some of the stuff is like, wait, this is a real thing that you really had made? It's quite shocking.
I think people maybe forget, for several of the things that we've made, how science fiction they were when we proposed them.
Yeah.
So self-driving cars, which now quite recently, Waymo, which originally came from X, people are saying, oh yeah, that's actually going to be like how we get around.
Right.
15 and a half years ago when we started Waymo, nobody was saying that.
It was up there with flying cars.
Exactly. Yeah. We now have Tara. This is using wireless optical communications. It's essentially a box a little bit smaller than a traffic light. You strap it to a pole, you plug in the internet, and it shoots a laser up to 20 kilometers. It has to be able to see another one of these boxes strapped to another pole. But as long as those 2 boxes can see each other, for a tiny amount of money in 1 hour, you can get the equivalent of a fiber optic cable, but instead of having to trench the fiber over months or years for millions of dollars, you have it up for a microscopic fraction of $1 million in 1 hour, 20 gigabits per second, the same thing you would get in a fiber optic cable.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is now out in the world. It's graduated from X. It's live in more than 20 countries. I guarantee you that was like had people laughing 7.5 years ago when we started that project.
That's impressive. I think you talked about this on the Moonshot podcast as well. Is this the one that goes over rivers that are sort of unpredictably, like during flood season, they go crazy?
Exactly. If anyone wants to see more about a bunch of the things we're going to be talking about here today, if you just Google Moonshot Factory, Moonshot Podcast, we have an entire season that goes into detail about many of the things we're talking about, including the history of Waymo, the history of Tara, and other things.
Yeah. We'll link to this stuff in the show notes. I wonder which of the projects, smart glasses, enhanced hearing, whatever, which something that came really close to making it out in the world, and then it was like, this thing's just not quite gonna happen.
Well, somewhat famously, Google Glass was something where we were, it now turns out, exactly right.
Yeah.
And we were too early.
Too early, yeah.
I think there were also mistakes that we made in how we rolled it out. But even if we hadn't made those mistakes, we were probably too early. And we just have to accept that at X, because our job is to be the right amount too early. But if you're trying to be the right amount too early, occasionally you're going to be not enough too early.
Yeah.
Okay, that happens. And sometimes you're going to be too early.
I remember this when Google Glass came out. There was a shooting range in San Francisco, which is actually surprising in itself. But there was a shooting range, and it had a sign on the door that said "No cyborgs," and it had a picture of Google Glass. And I guess it's for privacy, because people who shoot guns in San Francisco are maybe like, I don't want the government spying on me. I don't want Google spying on me. But a lot of people were really against just having video cameras in public. And I guess they forgot that everybody has a phone with a video camera on it. I'm not sure what the deal was there.
Yeah, and I think that ship has sailed. Yeah. People are now desperately trying to get themselves on video everywhere they go. So I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah. I wonder what the cost is sort of emotionally of constantly living in a mindset of, well, this might not work. Like, you have to eventually come around. Everyone here has to eventually come around to be comfortable with that uncertainty.
Bear with me. Let me use an analogy for you. Let's say I taught you card counting. You know how card counting works in Vegas. For blackjack would be the way that most people understand card counting. I teach you how to do that, and I give you some of my money, and you're going to go bet with my money in Vegas using the process of card counting. You're going to lose money of mine regularly when you're card counting. And I will have zero stress over whether you're losing my money on more than half the hands, probably. My stress is entirely going to be about whether you're following the process correctly.
Right. I see.
What we're doing, we're trying to be the card counters of innovation rather than the gamblers.
I see.
I have no stress about whether the process works. I have considerable stress about whether we're following the process correctly.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great analogy. And I suppose it's also a little bit easier, because what you're saying is if you're following the process, eventually the odds are in your favor that something's going to pop off. I know nothing about card counting, but I assume people do that because it increases your odds. What's a moonshot y'all killed early that still haunts you because it might have actually worked? That you can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots. I'll give you an example of one that we killed for the right reasons at the time, but it was particularly heartbreaking for us, and we keep coming back to it, that we haven't found the right back into it. We built a system a little bit bigger than this table for taking seawater and sunlight and turning it into methanol. So you could actually stick this thing you got out. You're taking CO2 out of the seawater, and you take some water, split it up, so you get H2, and from splitting up the water, and the CO2 you make it carbon monoxide. You strip off one of the oxygens, so you take carbon monoxide and two H2s, you jam them together, you get methanol.
Okay.
You can do this using sunlight.
Wow. Okay.
So you can have a carbon negative process that turns this thing into methanol, which you can then burn in a normal gas tank. and then it will go back up in the atmosphere, but the whole thing is circular then. It's the whole process is carbon neutral, which means that the 4 billion internal combustion engines in the world don't have to be thrown away.
Wow.
Oh my God, how great would that be for humanity, both because we don't have to throw all the internal combustion engines away and because you could do it in a carbon neutral way. When the first drips were coming out of this machine, people were just sobbing. It was so emotional. But a year later, we could not convince ourselves we were going to get it cheaper than about $15 a gallon of gas equivalent.
Right, okay.
This was maybe 8-9 years ago. And
just wait, gas will be $25.
Well,
you'll be fine.
that was part of the, like, we had an argument about that. But in the end, $15 a gallon of gas equivalent, even once we got there, was not going to change the world. So we killed the project. But we just keep coming back to it like, oh my God, that would be so great if we could get it down to $5.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in like Singapore or Monaco, where gas is probably close to that already, you could probably get away with that. I guess it depends on, well, yeah, there's a lot of factors. I can see why that's so tempting. It's just like, man, if oil prices do this, we're back in business, we're back in it. Is there a moonshot that you think should be happening right now but isn't because of, I don't know, fear or bureaucracy or something like that, like some other hang up?
Well, I'm very grateful to the people here at X and to Alphabet. No, I think we're limited by our creativity.
I thought maybe more government stuff as opposed to, the
I mean, we work with regulators around the world, but I mean, obviously sometimes we have to pace ourselves around the regulators, but we have found regulators to be very thoughtful. Here's my belief about the reason regulators get a bad rap that they don't deserve. If I worked in secret, if anybody works in secret, until you're absolutely done, you've spent all the money you have something which you really want to get approved because it's done, and you take it to the regulators and say, will you please approve this? They're going to be like, oh, this is the first time I'm seeing this. I don't know. Like, no. Like maybe a couple of years from now. Like, they need bake time. If you go to them early, when you're nowhere close to done, and you say, that over there, the moon, is where we're trying to get to. This is the help we want to give to humanity. If we could do that in a way which was helpful to humanity, was good to the citizens of this country, wasn't irresponsible, could you be excited about that with us? The regulators almost always say yes. Great. We're early in our process. We don't need to be right about how we're currently doing it. Would you give us feedback and go on this journey with us? And then they usually say, yeah, sure. And then they become a partner with us. And so we have to take them with us, but they usually come with us. We've found them to be actually good partners most of the time.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's not what you typically hear about regulators, for sure. Yeah,
but like I said, I think some of that is the fault of the people who didn't bring the regulators into the process. Right. They wait till the end and then say, "Here's my baby. Tell me it's beautiful." Right. Like, that's not a great position for the regulator to be in.
That's right. It's not a good strategy. Oh, and by the way, I need this faster. We're going bankrupt.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've got to let everyone go. Hurry up. So I'm stoked for drone delivery. And how is this coming along? I mean, I heard the podcast, of course, but what are the challenges here? Because it just sounds like the best way, like less traffic on the road, hopefully lower carbon footprint. You get your stuff super fast, right? I don't have to wait for UPS to do his whole route. Just come straight to me from the Amazon warehouse or whatever. I mean, that just, as long as they don't hit power lines or birds, like, when moon? When are we doing this?
I mean, it's happening. So
in rural Australia or whatever, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's happening increasingly in North Carolina, in Texas, a little bit in Arkansas, in London.
In London? Oh, yeah. That's cool. I haven't seen that.
Like downtown London.
Where did they land in downtown London?
They're actually taking things between hospitals.
Oh, I see.
Interesting.
That's a good idea.
So first, your listeners might be excited to know that thing that many people have felt over the last maybe 12, 18 months, where they finally had clicked in on Waymo and they thought, oh, that's not a future thing. That's a now thing.
Yeah, just drove by me on the road. Yeah.
Wing, the drones for package delivery that came from X, is going to be making people feel that way in about 12 to 18 months. It's the rate at which it's ramping up and the ways that they've structured themselves, as Waymo did, so that they could scale which is what most of the work is before the public really understands it. There's so much safety work and so much preparation to scale that it can take a decade from when you start to when you're really ready for people on the street to be like, oh yeah, there's a drone delivering to somebody.
Yeah.
But it's now coming quite quickly. And the sorts of things that have to be solved now is what happens, like, do you go to the Wing app and then say, what kind of food can you bring me? Do you go to McDonald's and see if they have a relationship with Wing? Do you go to DoorDash? And so it's partly about making those partnerships, but it is also partly about the consuming public getting used to using it, right?
Yeah.
There was a period of a decade between when DoorDash existed and when everybody was using DoorDash.
That's a good point. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's the noise issue and the way that this got handled was so interesting. It's quite nerdy, but you're proud of it because I heard your voice on the podcast talking about how this, because the drone noise, it's a little creepy, but that wasn't somehow a deal breaker.
Yes, and even more interestingly, we were positive. I can't tell you how positive we were. So positive it didn't even occur to us it was something to be positive about. That the noise that people would object to was the hover noise. Now, we have made that a hum and not like an angry bee sound.
Yeah, the angry bee
We
sound.
were very focused on this and making it sound and not like zzz.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when we actually started doing deliveries, and this is so typical of getting out into the real world, you don't know how people are really going to experience your thing until you get out into the world. When we get out there, partly because we had already solved that hum thing in hover mode, nobody cared about it hovering. And I believe it's because if it's delivering to you, you're so happy that what you want is dropping out of the sky. Right. You don't care about
Right.
And your neighbors, they might care a little bit, but they can get a delivery too.
Right.
But if something is going over your house, zzz,
yeah, 100 times a day.
Even if it's 60, 70 miles an hour, you can only hear it for 1 second. It's 200 feet in the air, so you can barely hear it. There were people who were annoyed, and I think it was fundamentally because they didn't feel like it was part of their world. Someone else was getting a delivery. And so, one, making sure they know they can get deliveries too helped them a lot. But the other one was we had to do substantial work to change the sound it made in forward flight. We didn't think that anyone was going to care because it is technically quieter. Like if you literally take a sound meter at a fixed distance away, it's quieter than hover sound. But it was the sound that people were more sensitive to for whatever reason. So we did a lot of work and now people don't hear it anymore.
Right. Change the sound, different propellers, different frequencies. It's kind of like fireworks. When they're your fireworks, they're exciting. When they're your neighbor's fireworks, you better not light anything on fire. That better not fly into my yard. He better stop by 10 p.m., right? It's one of those things. And it's really incredible. 3 to 25 minute delivery time. I mean, depending on distance. That beats normal delivery time. That beats Amazon's best delivery time by about like a day or whatever, almost.
Yeah, and the average delivery times are considerably shorter than that. And the specificity, if you could know within a few seconds when something is getting to your house.
Right.
Instead of like, I don't know, tomorrow
sometime before 10 p.m. And I'm like,
or even,
come on.
Even,
yeah,
a delivery company that's bringing dinner to your house will give you maybe a 30-minute window. Mm-hmm. You're not going to stand outside for 30 minutes. If you have 20 or 30 seconds where you know when it's coming, which the drone does, because it doesn't have to stop at traffic lights.
No traffic
There's
lights.
no traffic for it. So it can tell ahead of time exactly when it will be there.
It's the only thing is like your Chinese food hit a power line. So sorry about that. But
since we've never had Chinese food hit a power line, well, I'll let you know when it happens. Exactly. But so far, never.
Blood samples, organs, that I think is really particularly exciting because getting your Chinese food quick is cool and getting your toilet paper rolls refilled is cool. But having an organ come from somebody maybe in another state or another hospital across the state, and then you getting that in time that's literally life-saving.
Yeah, and I don't think people have really thought through how much moving things through the air is going to change our lives. I mean, for the better. If you have a sick kid at home and it's 2 a.m. and you need medicine, you don't even bother going to the CVS because it's not open.
Right. Oh, right.
But if you could just wish for something using your phone and 3 minutes later, it was literally coming out of the sky onto your backyard or wherever it was that you wanted it. Oh my God, that would change your life. Think about, like, right now we're used to sharing cars, Uber, or sharing bedrooms, Airbnb.
Yeah.
But you have a hammer in your house or apartment. I guarantee you do.
Sure.
And you use it 1/10,000th of the time, maybe.
Yeah.
10,000 people could share that one hammer, except that there's no way to share the hammer. Except what if there was Harry Potter Owl Post, where you just knew if you ever needed a hammer, it'd be there in a minute. But you didn't have to, you'd pay pennies for the hour you kept it, and then it would just disappear back into the ether. Not just the hammer, but for so many things in our lives. I mean, that's just another example, but I think if you could have what you want when you want it, you wouldn't buy more cream for your coffee than you need.
My garage would be, I could park my car in my garage.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Right. There's so much that we stockpile, perishables and non-perishables, in case we need it. You have batteries discharging in a drawer in your apartment or house.
Many. Yes.
On the off chance someday you need them.
Yeah.
And you know it's dumb to be letting them discharge, and you have them anyway, as we all do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you knew that whatever battery shape you wanted would just appear in 1 minute, you would keep no batteries in your house.
I want to do this with my kids' toys. They can vanish, and then when my kid cries and says, "Where's that rabbit with the thing on it?" we can go, bing, bring that thing back. We thought she forgot. How long till a drone can fly me to and from the hospital, though? That's what I want, because, it's great if you can get an organ. Obviously, that's useful. But what happens if I'm in a crash? You ever go to New York in the ambulance and you're just like, ugh, I feel bad for whoever's in the back of that thing, or waiting on the road for that thing to arrive and it's going 3 miles an hour through traffic? This could be the end of that. You could have emergency drone life flights, which get you to the hospital in like 5 minutes.
So, I mean, the correct answer is, I don't know. Wing has no immediate plans to do that.
Yeah.
And I will just observe that they have gone from like a 2.5 pound payload to a 5 pound payload recently.
Sure.
If they do a doubling every 2 years or so, then, you can think within 10 years, they could take, something the weight of a person. So I'd say, order of magnitude 10 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like that's inevitable, because that's, well, it'll be battlefield first, right? It'll be done in the battlefield, and then you'll say, "Oh, we should put these in Manhattan." Have you seen the humanoid robot factory? Jen, what's that factory called that we're touring in San Francisco with the humanoid robots? Do you remember? Anyway, have you seen? You know what we're talking about by any chance?
Let me give you a spicy take on robots with legs.
Yeah,
because I've had this conversation over and over again.
Okay.
Show me a robot with a wheeled base like the one you saw downstairs that's super useful, and it just can't be that next level of useful because it can't get to the second floor. I'm happy to get it legs. Legs is not the hard part. Until you have something which is useful with wheels on the bottom, why are you working on legs? So, that isn't even the spicy part. I think that's just obvious.
Yeah, sure.
The spicy comment would be, given that there's some reason to believe that working on robots with legs is a bit of a distraction because it looks cool. And I would encourage everyone to sort of refocus on making sure the robot can be maximally useful in the easiest way possible, not the coolest way possible. I think if you find organizations that are working with that attitude in mind, you will probably find the winners.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Even Rosie, I think her name was Rosie, on the Jetsons, even she didn't have legs. She had little wheels on the bottom. But then again, I don't know if they had stairs in their house. I guess that mystery is yet to be solved. Tell me more about the balloon internet access, because this was one of the big things everybody heard about X when it was going down, and it just seems so amazing and useful. This was, for me, science fiction, like internet coming from the sky.
So, spoiler alert, it didn't work well enough. And I'm going to get back and tell you the story in a second. And the reason in the end it couldn't close wasn't technical or operational. The problem ultimately was that we couldn't get it profitable enough. In the beginning, it made a lot of sense to try the following. You want something that can beam the internet over large parts of the earth. People may be more familiar now with Starlink.
Yes.
Right? But there's a time delay. Literally, the speed of light is the speed of light. If it has to go up to 600,000 or 700,000 feet, then it's going to take a lot longer than if it only has to go up to 60 or 65,000 feet.
Sure.
And it's a lot easier to talk to phones in using the normal protocols like 4G or 5G if you're close enough to them, which you can do from 65,000 feet, but you cannot do at 600 or 700,000 feet.
That makes sense.
So at 65,000 feet as opposed to 650,000 feet, that's not a satellite, that's a balloon. So could you hang balloons in 65,000 feet, make them stay up for a year or more, hang cell towers under them, have them somehow magically make an ad hoc mesh network so they're all talking to each other and sharing data back and forth, beaming the internet across the earth, where some of them always have a connection back to an internet backbone, so that if one balloon is getting data from users on the ground, and it doesn't itself have a connection to the internet, it can bounce that data to another balloon that does have connection back to the internet backbone. We built this. It was flying around the world. We were delivering data to many hundreds of thousands of people in several countries. So super proud of the technical and operational work it took to get that done. And while from a business perspective, we couldn't get it to close with the telcos that we were working with, the way that those balloons were passing data, or at least one of the ways those balloons were passing data back and forth, was using lasers.
Yeah.
And so as this project went away, we call this process moonshot composting. The people, the data, the ideas, the patents, even some of the partners, this laser, some of these people said, hold on, the lasers that the balloons were using to talk to each other, what if we did that on the ground? I know it's not supposed to work on the ground because of rain, because of fog, particulates in the air from like smoke from a fire or something like that. But what if? Let us just try. 7.5 years later, that project, Tara, that I was describing before, is now moving more data to customers in 20 countries around the world every 15 minutes than Loon did in its entire 9-year history.
Wow.
So sometimes, back to your question about how does it feel to like fail, it's learning. It's not failing. If you take a long enough time horizon, like we're building towards something, and it just takes a certain amount of like, whoops, nothing under that rock to find what's really important.
Yeah. So even though the balloon part didn't work out, the laser part did. So it's still a win.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the explanation you give in the podcast, which is light is so much faster than radio waves. So you can wiggle, basically the slowest you can wiggle, and that's a technical term, the slowest you can wiggle a photon is like 100 times faster than the fastest you can wiggle an electron in a radio wave.
Yeah.
So fiber optic internet is going to be, you think 5G is fast, fiber optic internet is like at the slowest 100 times plus faster than that.
Yeah, inherently, as you move from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, what we've gotten is we're moving in higher and high. Each of those is a higher frequency of radio frequencies, wiggling faster as you described it. That means you can pack more data in, but it's also becoming more point to point. So you have to be more focused. It's just the way the radio frequencies work. Unfortunately, right after 5G is something called the terahertz gap, which is a problem for two very different, interesting reasons. The first problem is that gap from about 300 gigahertz to about 3 terahertz, this is the frequency at which something is wiggling, is too fast for radio frequencies, but too slow for optics.
I see.
It's like an uncomfortable tweener stage.
Huh.
Also, in that same gap is the oxygen absorbing band. That is, if you send an electromagnetic thing that's radiating at this frequency, it tends to be eaten up by the oxygen in the air.
Yeah.
That is, like a microwave wiggles the water molecules.
Right.
That's why your food heats up in the microwave. So that space doesn't work very well. On the other side of the terahertz gap is optics. And optics have some things that are really appealing. You can put in, as you just described, hundreds of times as much data into a very narrow band. And it's unregulated. You don't have to buy spectrum. It's just light.
Right. Right.
The one thing that you have to be able to satisfy yourself is you have to be able to see things. It can't go through walls anymore.
Right. So it's not going to work if your phone is in your pocket. It's got to be line of sight.
Exactly.
So you're sort of capped at 5G plus or whatever the fastest radio waves.
For now.
For now.
But as this team has announced, they have a chip. I actually have it over there. I can show it to you afterwards.
Sitting at a top secret shelf with a pile of Post-it notes.
Well, we've announced it now. A little bit smaller than a smushed pea.
Okay.
This chip is not a computer chip. I mean, it's made in a fab, but it is an electrically steerable laser. So you push one laser into this computer chip. It splits it up into hundreds of little baby lasers that are very carefully aligned. And then it slows up some of the laser waves relative to others very carefully, just a tiny bit, billionths of a second, so that the waves either add to each other or cancel each other out in just the right way, so that instead of seeing hundreds of lasers coming out of this chip, it's effectively one laser, which we can point just by electrically changing the properties of this chip many thousands of times a second, making a laser where you can point it around without having to have any moving parts, and is the size of, a smushed pea, not even, is going to totally change whether it can be in your phone and how data gets moved around.
Jeez. Yeah, I just wonder how it would work if it's in my pocket or in a closed room.
TBD.
TBD. Yeah. Wow. Going back to something you said earlier, how do you manage or handle brilliant people who can't maybe detach their identity from their ideas? I take it many of them don't last here.
Yeah,
so they change.
I'm role playing with you, but
sure.
If you wanted to come to X, this is one of the first things that we would talk about, which is we're card counters here. Mm-hmm. We're not gamblers. If you have some idée fixe and you just believe in flying cars and you want to do flying cars, I sincerely wish you the best, and I'm begging you, do not come to X. Because you will be miserable here.
Howard Hughes.
I need you to understand we will miss occasional opportunities like that. We're at peace with missing those opportunities because on balance, for every one person who is a Howard Hughes, there are lots of people, thousands, who think they're Howard Hughes and aren't.
Right.
And so I don't believe that me or anyone else is particularly good at predicting the future, but we can be world-class at discovering the future efficiently. If you want to be part of a team that does that and tying your sense of self-worth to that, you might love it here at X. But if you don't think you can rewire your sense of self-worth to how great you are at filtering ideas, if you're going to get stuck on, I want to have my idea live, you're just going to be miserable here. And I need you to know that before you come.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's got to be a culture where people are not afraid to maybe look dumb sometimes. I mean, not dumb, but like maybe your idea doesn't work and everybody knows about it kind of thing. That happens all the time, I assume, and it's part of the culture. But it's got to be tough to do that in an environment full of PhDs and egos and big bets and stuff like that.
I guess. I mean, let me give you two very different examples about how we try to help people get used to that. One, I have wheels on my feet.
Yeah, you're rollerblading around.
It reminds me not to take myself too seriously. It reminds everybody else here to not take me or themselves too seriously. So there's a lot of ways. There's a flying pig on the wall right there.
Oh, yeah.
Where we try to remind each other about that all the time, just to have some levity in the process. We're serious about what we do, but that doesn't mean we have to do it seriously. Here's something on the other end of the spectrum, but I think it also answers your question. We worked on nuclear fusion for the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't know if you heard, but in our podcast series, we talked about, with great pride, exactly why we went after this particular way of doing nuclear fusion. And even now that we've closed that project down very recently, I'm so proud not only of having done it, but of the people who did it. And they got a standing ovation at the all hands out there on the bleachers very recently. And they felt great, saying, we had a small chance of creating an enormous amount of goodness for the world and for Alphabet because of this thing we went and looked at. And we looked at it in a really thoughtful, scrappy way. It took very big brains, being very entrepreneurial, to do it like they did it. And they had a 250-page slide deck about why they closed their own project down. They were sad, but they were also incredibly proud. And people are pawing at each other to get those people onto their team for the next thing they try because of how smart they are and how intellectually honest they were. So it's getting
healthy.
the culture
Yeah.
to reward is the trick, but it is inherently a positive, not a negative.
Yeah, no, I love that. Man, too bad the fusion thing didn't work out. I feel like that's the key sort of bottleneck for a lot of these projects, right? Desalination of water, decarbon the atmosphere. I mean, once you have unlimited energy, it solves a lot of issues.
We'll try again.
Yeah, give it a shot. See what you come up with. What ethical line have you seen people flirt with in the name of progress that you think maybe deserves a little bit more scrutiny? Maybe the AI stuff, or I don't know what your feelings are on that.
Rather than throwing anyone else under the bus,
Sure, yeah.
let me try to describe for you how we don't do that. And I don't just mean I'm going to claim we don't do that. Let me tell you the process we try to go through, because I guess I wish more people did something sort of like the following. One, when you come and propose a moonshot, let's hear what the huge problem is. Let's hear what your radical proposed solution is, that science fiction sounding product or service. One of the things we'll do is we will try to game out, like, what are the unintended consequences? It's pretty hard to come up with, like, unless you're an actually bad person, which I'm presuming you're not if you work at X.
Yeah.
We tend to have a hard time pre-guessing what bad stuff can happen. Occasionally it happens and we do try, but that's like table stakes.
Mm-hmm.
What we do, which I feel really good about, and I wish more people did, this is the real answer to your question, is we get out in the world as fast as possible, way before we're done, in ways that are safe, and go learn what we're wrong about. Waymo has been on the road, and until like 2 years ago, nobody could buy a ride with nobody in the front seat. We've been driving for 13 years before that, where there was one of our people in the front seat with their hands right by the steering wheel 8 hours a day. I don't know if it was 8 hours a day, but like many hours a day. And these were trained professionals. They were, as much as they could, not touching the steering wheel or the gas pedals, but they could, and they had been trained on how to deal with even really emergency situations. That was an example where we were getting Waymo out into the world really early and doing it in a safe way. It was extra expense to us, but that meant that no one else was in danger. And then we discovered so many things that you would never come up with. People read the body language of cars, right? So Waymo's first job was making sure it was safe. Like, don't hit anything, don't hurt anybody.
Right.
Then it had to worry about things like, don't make the passenger, seasick by going too jerky away. But there's a lot of stuff past there. Like, how do you show people, not with your physical body, but with your car's body, when you're going to merge? There's like, I'm thinking about it. Right. And then there's like, okay, I'm really doing it, committed. Which tells them to like give you the space.
Right.
All of those things, you have to just learn in the world. Yeah. And there are like second and third order effects of all of these things. And we've learned lots that we thought we were helping in one way, and we had to change what we were doing. But we can only learn these unintended consequences and the best way to deal with them, not by sitting here on a whiteboard and writing out how we might be wrong. but by getting out in the world in really thoughtful, responsible ways with the actual communities who are going to have to, in the end, have these things as part of their lives, and saying to the communities, how is this for you? How would you wish this was different? And getting their feedback. That works wonders in terms of actually solving for the unintended consequences.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I find it interesting how many people resist technology because it's almost like they assume that they know it's bad. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the Waymo cars getting vandalized because there's nobody in it. And it's like, what's really going on here? Some of it is kids be punks, but some of it is like this, we don't want self-driving cars. It's bad for society somehow. And I wonder what you think about that. Is this just like, oh, we can't get rid of the elevator operators? It's just kind of that same thing. We can't have this automation. It's going to be dangerous. It's this sort of this weird unfounded fear. And it's weird that young people are doing it. Like, you would think they would be the first ones who realize humans are pretty bad drivers. Maybe we should let computers do a little bit more of that.
Yes, and just let's have some compassion. Like, the world is changing really fast right now, and I think that that's disorienting for people of all ages. So I really do have compassion for everybody in that experience. I would also say technology, while it is usually, maybe not exclusively, but the vast majority of time, really great for humanity, it tends to have concentrated harm and diffuse benefits.
Yeah.
Right? So if you lost your job as an elevator operator, the fact that everybody in the world gets to where they wanted to go a second earlier or a penny cheaper is
care.
Cold comfort to you because you lost your job. Is that overall better for society? Yes, it is. And we, society, should find some way, this is like a public policy issue, to take care of that elevator operator. I don't think that that's best understood as the elevator company is a bad company. It's us as a society that have failed that elevator operator by wiring our society in a way that takes care of them, at least helps them to get to the next job with some retraining or whatever that is. Also, there tends to be, with technology, some upfront, if not harm, then at least complexity, even though there's long-term benefits. So you can say that the move for society from an agrarian society to an industrial society was net a positive.
Sure.
I think so. Most people wouldn't go back.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that worked for society, that was a bumpy ride.
Yeah, that's true.
And in some ways, we may have a bumpy ride in front of us. And so by recognizing these things, it's not to say that technology is bad or wrong or that we should try to slow it up, but recognizing how change functions in our society might help us to be able to metabolize the change better.
I think, yeah, that makes sense. I wonder if you've ever had to pull the plug on a project because maybe it was veering into territory that made you uncomfortable, or because the potential societal cost outweighed the benefits in some way, even if it promised massive profits or technological leaps forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one that I think is just easy to describe.
Sure.
It was a long time ago. This was like 12 or 13 years ago. We had made, it was only a week or two of progress. It was early in the stage. It was a brainstorm about finding much cheaper ways to collect huge amounts of water and reclaiming it in various ways so that it could be sold and used by cities. And there's a lot to be said for that. If that water was really going to end up in the ocean. But as we dug into it further, it became clear that the vast majority of the water we'd be collecting would otherwise have either ended up in the water table, like going down into the ground where eventually you can get it from a well, or was going into the dirt that eventually got used by farmers and other plants. And so it stopped feeling like it wasn't like found value that we were sort of harvesting for the world. It was really like, I'm taking your clean water and I got it before you did, and then I'm selling it back to you. That was an example where once we had the clarity that that's what was really being proposed, not consciously, but de facto, we canceled the project. We're like, nope, not going forward with that one.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of interesting. It reminds me of when we had those droughts and they were trying to capture the LA water that was just going into the ocean, and it turned out to be not just a matter of plugging up the drain, right? It was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. You can't just like block the river thing that goes into the ocean. There's a little bit more to it than that. Water's just that's got to be one of the most complex systems that that we have anywhere on the planet. I mean that whole thing with the that's quite a moonshot to figure out how to
And
mess with that
we've taken
successfully.
a couple runs at clean water, other than the one I just named. One of the ones we were really proud about and sad to end was we made a box that would turn air and sunlight into clean water. It would, even in low humidity environments, it could take the water out of the air just using sunlight. And so you could make a box that would make 5-ish liters a day, and it would be like no bigger than this table. That'd be pretty profound in a lot of the world where there's a hard time getting safe, clean water. And what ultimately matters is the techno-economics. If you can do that for $1 a liter, nobody cares. At 10 cents a liter, it's kind of glamping. There'll be uses, but it's not going to change the world. At 1 cent a liter, it would absolutely change the world. We convinced ourselves that the box that we had made could get to below 10 cents a liter, but we could not convince ourselves we were going to get down to a penny a liter. And as we sometimes do, we published our results in Nature, I think in that case, so that other people could know what we did and build on top of it if they had a better idea than us.
Yeah, that stuff's interesting. I was nerd out about those ideas. I can't remember who it was on the show was telling me that they figured out how to make something where that people could clean the water and kids could get the clean water, but the problem ended up being education because they would take the bucket that they had the clean water and then they would be like, all right, we're going to use this to like feed our pigs in the morning and then we're going to bring it to the clean water thing later. And it's like, why are we still getting sick? It was just like, oh gosh, okay. So the problem is that they don't have clean water. So they just don't
Germ
understand
theory of
germ
disease.
theory. Yeah. Yeah. X working on the frontier of human capability. I wonder if anything scares you about the technologies that you're creating. Like, is there anything where you're like, oh, we have to be really careful with this one?
I mean, yes, I'm open to lots of the things that we do having potential bad uses. I think that that's you in any technology or product that you make. I would say that think of it as like 3 basic buckets. Bucket 1, like that's your job. It's like core to what the thing is. Don't mess that up. So if it's a self-driving car or a drone for package delivery, don't hit anybody. Don't hit a building. Like that's your job, right? The second bucket is second order effects that you have enough control over. It really is your job to still handle them, even if it's kind of an exogenous thing, which maybe a bad company would ignore. I think hopefully as a good company, we don't want to ignore it. So you were mentioning the sound that our drones make.
Mm-hmm.
We could say not our problem, but we don't, because I think that's legitimately still our problem to make it so that doesn't bother the people that it's flying over. Then there's a third bucket where it's something that the product maker can't change, and we wouldn't want the product maker to change. So might some people lose their jobs because some technology is coming onto the scene? Of course, that actually has happened for most technologies. Does that need to be addressed? Yes, for sure. But you don't want individual companies saying, I will decide how society is going to respond to this. That is a public policy issue. So the technology maker has a responsibility to explain to the public policy makers, here's what our technology is, here's how it's going to evolve over time. Now you make public policy that helps our society embrace this as best as possible. And of course, regulate us to the extent that that's important.
Yeah, I think it's got to be quite a delicate dance because you're right. A lot of companies are like, we're just gonna break this, and then they can try and stop us, and we'll litigate it for 20 years and make money in the meantime. Yeah, it's like the opposite of that particular course of action. I wonder if there's an uncomfortable truth about human nature that you've had to face while trying to solve these big idealistic problems. Sorry, I know I'm asking really easy questions today.
Yeah. I mean, aside from the fact that people have a hard time with change,
Yeah.
Um, there are, again, I have great compassion for this, but I think that there are people who sincerely, even if they knew for a fact that self-driving cars are in all cases, even in this extreme scenario, the self-driving car is absolutely period full stop safer than Bob at driving, your kid across town or whatever. Some people would just rather have Bob drive across town. And is that, reasonable from a scientific perspective, from an intellectual perspective? It's hard to get behind that. But is that understandable from an emotional perspective? Yes, it is. Because putting trust in something we don't understand is uncomfortable. And so I'm using that as an example. And I think there's a lot of things like this in the world where we too quickly write off people's feelings as though they don't count if they don't match up to the facts. And I think we society are a little too fast on the trigger on that one. It's part of being a society. We need to bring those people along and find ways to help them through the process.
Yeah, you're right. It's tough. I mean, it's easy to sort of mock like the people that think they'll be a better driver than a Waymo because I've been driving for 30 years. I'm a better driver when I'm drunk than I am when I'm sober. Like those people, we just kind of imagine that they're all like that. But there is a part of me that's like, do I want only robots flying my plane when I go to New York? Or do I want a human in there just because it just seems like there should be? I'm kind of in the latter camp, even if there's just like a 20-year-old kid sitting there who knows kind of how everything's supposed to go, could take over in an emergency. That makes me feel a lot better than knowing that it's just an iPad flying the 747.
I get it. And that's a fascinating example because in that example, planes are now flying themselves enough of the time that humans aren't having emergency experiences often enough. And so one of the biggest risks that airlines have now is that they don't feel great handing responsibility back to the humans because they haven't had practice because the robots, the software is doing it most of the time. We're in this uncanny valley where partly because a lot of people totally understandably feel as you've described, including the unions for a very different reason. We're a little betwixt and between. The robots aren't quite good enough to do it all of the time, but the humans have to work in simulators to get a lot of this experience because they're not getting it in the planes. It's complicated.
So if your flight is too cheap, ask yourself, are you on the training flight for that guy? Is the autopilot off on this one? That's like, why is this flight $400 cheaper than the other one? It's the same seat. It's the same route. You might be on the emergency training route. I know we're a little bit short on time. So we hear a lot about humanity's big problems: climate change, inequality, misinformation. What do you think is an underrated, invisible crisis that maybe we're ignoring because it's less dramatic, but quietly equally / more dangerous?
I'm such an optimist. Let me reframe that as an opportunity.
Yeah, reframe. Just take the question apart and put it back together if you want. That's fine.
We, as a species, are so used to refusing to go back to the past with respect to all the changes we've gotten used to, and yet almost unable to imagine how different the world could be. So here's an example. I believe that the 21st century will be defined at least as much by humanity having learned to program biology, synthetic biology, as humanity learning to program silicon defined the 20th century. That's not a problem, but neither is programming silicon, right? Programming silicon opened up the opportunity to solve a huge number of problems. Programming biology, being able to take these self-replicating carbon negative machines that the world has built for us over a couple billion years and repurpose them to make things for us, is going to be absolutely transformative for humanity. And it will allow us to make things faster, more custom, make them at a much lower carbon footprint, to make them cheaper. It's going to solve a whole bunch of humanity's problems. And it's all going to stem from being able to program life, being able to program biology. That's an example that sounds science fiction now, but will for sure be one of the big stories for humanity in the 21st century.
Yeah, I'm hoping I live long enough to like reprint the liver I need or the pancreas that I need, or, you know, come to Mountain View and have one installed that was made back here somewhere. Because that's, I mean, look, we have cancer to deal with, but if you can get a new heart because your ticker's not working as well as it used to, that would be pretty amazing. And it seems like that's actually not, again, not completely impossible. Even with tech we have now, it's just we haven't quite gotten it right, but it's not merely the stuff of Netflix specials at this point. What's on the opposite side of this? What technology or idea do you think that a lot of people are super excited about, but deep down maybe you suspect is fundamentally flawed or just overhyped?
One of the easiest ways to predict the future for anyone who'd like to predict the future at a cocktail party is just say the following line over and over again, because it tends to be true. Mm-hmm. Whenever anyone brings up any subject about technology, you say, that's probably overhyped in the short term and underhyped in the long term. Because every technology in the history of humanity has been true of.
I see.
People get too excited over some short period of time and not excited enough over a much longer period of time. And so whether this is synthetic genomics or artificial intelligence or others, I think over the next 2 or 3 years, the world's going to change less than we think, because the world just changes kind of slow. There's a lot going on right now.
That's how I feel about AI, man. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And over 10 or 20 years, I think most people haven't fully absorbed how much the world is going to change and can change for the better.
This is how I feel about AI, right? Now, you talk to somebody who loves AI, we're all losing our jobs tomorrow. You're not going to need anybody to do anything. We need universal basic income yesterday or we're all going to die. But yeah, maybe in 10 or 20 years, it'll be like, holy moly, this thing really is doing everyone's job. And it's arranged a government and a world for us that is much, we never would have thought of many of these things ourselves. Look at how efficient our systems are. But that's less exciting than every single person in New York is going to lose their job by 2026 because of AI. It's just, but so what was the phrase that makes us sound smart? Overhyped in the short term, underhyped in the long term?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'll give you another example that it just sticks in my mind. I was at an exhibition on the history of design and aluminum. This was like 20 years ago. And there was a hat stand in the corner, and I literally thought it was a hat stand. I had a coat. I was about to hang it, and then I realized it was actually part of the exhibit. And it looked like it was made of wood. That's why I thought it was just a hat stand or a coat stand. But it was actually made of aluminum and then painted to look like wood. And there had been this moment where aluminum went from more expensive than gold. And then once people figured out how to use electricity basically to extract aluminum much cheaper than they had before, all of a sudden it was this new material with these cool properties and we didn't know what to do with it. And one of the first things people had done was made something out of wood, and then they felt obligated to paint it to look like wood because that's what hat stands were things that were made out of wood. The reason I'm bringing this up is it is also a truism that people are so wrong over at least the medium to long term about how technology will change our lives. That it will is a near certainty, but how it will, you can always find somebody who is right afterwards. That's just like random luck. If you get, 1 million people to pick the number of jelly beans in a huge jar, one of them will be right.
Right, that's true.
But they weren't right because they were wise. They just guessed a number and they happened by random chance to be the person guessing the number. But you can be certain that we're not right about how technology will play out, and asking ourselves how we can be in discovery about what it will be while taking care of society along the way. I think that's the real trick.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for having us over here at X. It's cool to see the Moonshot Factory in person, especially because I walked past many signs that said no visitors beyond this point. Abby was with me, but it still counts.
Well, welcome inside the Velvet Rope. It's been great to have you here. This has been fun. And I do hope that your listeners check out Moonshot Factory, Moonshot Podcast. If you Google that or look at the link that you'll provide, you can go a lot deeper on a bunch of the things we've been talking about.
Can I ask you one last thing real quick?
Of course.
What do you think is the most overrated piece of innovation advice that you hear repeated and you're just kind of like, oh, whatever? There's got to be something.
I mean, as sort of the crown prince of failure, which I think is horribly misunderstood, fail fast is true and not helpful. Yes, once you have the evidence that you're doing the wrong thing, you should stop doing that thing. I don't know who would argue against that. But everybody knows that. The question isn't whether stopping once you know you're wrong is a good idea. That is super not helpful. It's how do you help people to do that? Which, since we're at the end of our time here, that's what we go into in a lot of detail in our podcast, is how to create an environment and a culture that actually makes that possible.
Yeah, love it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jordan. That was fun.